In the bustling heart of Granton City, a place where streetlights flickered more often than they shone, stood an old secondary school known as St. Matthew's College. Its cracked walls were painted pale blue, its playground filled with rusting swings, and its classrooms echoed with laughter by day, yet whispers of dread by night. Not far from it, on the same street, stood the towering St. Matthew's Catholic Church. Its giant wooden doors, worn smooth by decades of worshippers, opened into a hall with rows of wooden pews, a towering crucifix, and a marble altar that seemed to hold secrets far older than the city itself. The church bell rang every morning, calling students to prayer before classes began. And at its center was Reverend Father Samuel, a man of faith whose deep eyes carried both kindness and shadows of battles no one could see. Among the students were 3 friends: Daniel, the brave one, always standing tall even when fear pressed heavy; Michael, the curious one, with questions that often led him to forbidden places; Peter, the timid one, who trembled at the slightest creak in the hallway. They had grown used to the church bell's song until one morning it rang in a way they had never heard before. Long, slow, uneasy. That same week, strange things began to happen. A boy from the senior class disappeared on his way home. Whispers spread of dark-robed figures seen near the abandoned quarters behind the church. Some students swore they saw candlelight flickering through broken windows at midnight. Father Samuel prayed harder than ever, but the shadows around St. Matthew's grew thicker. The air seemed heavier. The children began to feel it too, especially Michael, whose restless curiosity pulled him where he should not go. One evening, after prep class, Michael convinced Daniel and Peter to follow him into the old staff quarters. The building was silent, its wooden beams cracked and blackened with age. The 3 crept inside, their footsteps crunching on shattered glass. Suddenly, they froze. A sound echoed low chanting, like voices rising and falling in a strange rhythm. Then, the faint glow of red candles flickered through the darkness. Peter whispered, his teeth chattering, "Daniel, someone's in here." The boys edged closer, peering through a broken doorway. What they saw made their blood run cold. Figures in hooded robes stood in a circle, their hands raised, their voices heavy with words that no child should ever hear. In the center of the circle lay something wrapped in white cloth, stained with a dark, spreading color. Michael gasped. The sound was small, but in that silence it was enough. The chanting stopped. The figures turned. One of the robed men hissed, his voice sharp as broken glass. "Who's there?" The boys stumbled back, their hearts pounding, but it was too late. The shadows had seen them. And from that moment, their lives at St. Matthew's would never be the same again. This was only the beginning. The school, the church, and the children were about to be pulled into a darkness fed by greed, a darkness that demanded more than prayers to be broken. Night fell over St. Matthew's College, but for Daniel, Michael, and Peter, sleep was impossible. What they had seen inside the abandoned staff quarters haunted them. The chanting, the robed figures, the bundle wrapped in stained white cloth. By morning, whispers flooded the school. Another student was missing. Some claimed he had run away. Others swore his cries were heard near the churchyard late at night. Reverend Father Samuel noticed the boys' trembling faces during morning mass. After service, he called them aside, his voice firm but kind. "Children, the shadows you have seen are not of God. Evil has found its way near his house, but you must not wander into places that will consume your souls." But Michael, ever curious, could not stay silent. "Father, we saw them, men in robes. They were doing something." Father Samuel's face darkened. For a moment, the boys saw not just a priest, but a man wrestling with something greater than himself. That night, Father Samuel walked alone to the old staff quarters, clutching his rosary. He pushed the heavy wooden door and entered. The stench of wax and smoke filled the air. On the floor, symbols had been drawn in red, circling the place like a prison. At the center lay the remains of a sacrifice, covered in cloth. From the darkness, a voice hissed, "You should not have come, Father." Figures emerged. The same hooded man the boys had seen. Their leader stepped forward, his eyes burning with hunger. "The church once fed us, but we desired more power, wealth, and life everlasting. You cannot stop us." Father Samuel raised the crucifix, his voice strong. "Your greed will be your ruin. The blood you spill will cry out against you." The men laughed, their shadows flickering against the walls, and from behind them, the boys who had followed despite the priest's warning saw everything. Suddenly, the leader pulled a dagger, its blade shining under the candlelight. He pointed at the children. "Bring them forward. Fresh blood binds stronger than the old." The boys screamed as the robed men lunged. Daniel grabbed a broken stick from the floor, swinging wildly. Michael stumbled, yet his eyes still burned with curiosity, desperate to understand the ritual. Peter collapsed to his knees, frozen with terror. Father Samuel stepped between the children and the cultists, his voice echoing through the room as he prayed. Light from the crucifix flared, forcing the men to recoil. But the victory was brief. One of the robed figures hurled a burning candle, and flames licked the old wooden walls. The children ran, Father Samuel pushing them toward the door. Smoke filled the air. As they escaped into the night, a chilling voice followed them. "This is not the end. Blood calls to blood. You cannot run from what has begun." The fire at the staff quarters did not destroy the evil, it only fed it. By dawn, the entire school buzzed with fear. Parents gathered, demanding answers. But behind closed doors, Father Samuel knew the truth. The ritualists were not finished. The boys stayed close together. Daniel stood guard. Michael scribbled strange symbols he remembered from the ritual, and Peter prayed with trembling lips. That evening, as the sun bled red across the sky, the church bell rang 3 times, slow, hollow, ominous. The sound carried across the city, pulling both faithful and faithless into silence. Inside St. Matthew's Church, candles burned without flame, shadows moved across the altar. The cultists had returned, and this time they had invaded the very heart of God's house. Father Samuel entered, holding high his crucifix. The boys, unable to leave him, followed at a distance. The leader of the cultists stood before the altar, his hands dripping with symbols painted in red. "You cannot save them, Samuel," he sneered. "The church gave us power, but greed gave us more. Tonight this altar belongs to us." The priest's voice thundered. "You trade your souls for dust. You believe wealth can buy eternity, but it will only purchase your destruction." The cultists advanced. The children cowered behind the pews. Daniel whispered, "We have to help him." Michael, eyes wide, clutched the notes he had written, realizing too late the meaning of the final symbol. It was not just a mark of power, but a curse that devoured even those who used it. Suddenly, the leader raised his dagger. The church seemed to shudder. The boys screamed. Father Samuel stepped forward, placing himself between the blade and the children. The strike fell. A silence deeper than death filled the church. Father Samuel staggered, his crucifix glowing faintly in his bloodied hand. He whispered with his last breath, "Greed destroys all." The ground shook. The symbols drawn by the cultists flared with fire, turning against them. One by one, the robed men shrieked as shadows consumed their bodies, leaving only ashes. The children watched in horror as the church bell tolled one final time. When the smoke cleared, Father Samuel lay still before the altar, his hand clutched around the crucifix. Daniel knelt beside him, tears streaming. Michael dropped his notebook, his curiosity forever silenced. Peter whispered through sobs, "He gave his life so we could live." The city would later whisper of the fire, the collapse, and the disappearance of the cultists. But the truth lived only with the three boys, whose lives would never be the same. And from that day, the ruins of St. Matthew's Church stood as a warning. Greed leads only to destruction. No wealth can buy a soul once lost to darkness.